Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 11 books, a CEO of 12 years, the founder of a startup set on data privacy, most importantly, an elite performance coach of over 18 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. Most specifically, though, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries through to pathways that develop a top 10 tennis player and coach. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, the V by Dr. B to the rule of transference, and I've coined terms from the barrier breaker to the golden rule and a slew of others. As has become custom in each episode, we dive into one of my books and just really dig a bit deeper and share additional insights. And look, the book we have been focusing on for some time now is The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, a comprehensive discussion on developing elite coaches and players. And look, today's episode is no different from the others. There's always that gold nugget, that really, that hidden secret to really take away that I can promise you today that you can take it and you can implement it into your own training load, your practices, irrespective if you are that player, coach or parent, and you will be able to get that edge and nudge that little bit closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. So as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today. Look, as I've shared in the intro, today's no different. I'm pretty excited about today's episode, mainly because I just know how important it is. And look, we're focusing on the secrets to optimal performance success. And if you want to follow along, we are on page 153. And today's topic is, what's your purpose? Training with intention. And look, I know I normally leave this till later in the episode, but look, I think it's so important pivotal to take that humanized approach here. And look, when we're looking at intention to purpose, there's no better episode, I think, than really looking at that assimilation there and really how, irrespective if you are that tennis player, that coach or parent guardian there, when we're looking at, that performance spectrum and you are immersed in your sport of choice, so here we say tennis, at the end of the day, you are also that individual. So you do go home. Even if you want to call the tennis court your home, it's still, that second home. You still go home to your other life, so your everyday life. And for a lot of athletes listening, there's a very good chance you're still in school or you've just left school or maybe, you're at university, irrespective. And for that coach, obviously a lot of, your day is around working with athletes, but there's still a time where, you take your hat off, so to speak, and you just get to reset. And it's the same as a parent for the parents, that you could be hands-on with your child, when they are on the court, and again, irrespective of where they are, and when we're focusing on, that intent behind, their sporting performance, there is still that home life. And it's so important to be able to just reset. And I think this is something that's often overlooked for that child or children to the athletes, because a lot of that, and we've touched on this previously, that identity it's really attached to the court. It's attached to their performance. And when we can start looking around, intent to purpose, and I guess I interchange those words because it really depends on your connotation there, your meaning, your understanding, and I guess there's an interplay. But at the end of the day, these words, or I guess that pretense, it's paramount. And it's one thing to have that in your sporting performance, but it's such another thing to just be able to relax and reset away from the court. And it's not just applicable for the player. And you might say, why for the parents as well? Because we know and we acknowledge that there's such a heavy load there if you are that parent involved in your child's, that performance, whether it's taking them there, talking to them about their performance, working with them, building on that. We've touched on that triangular approach, whereas that coach-parent relationship. So you're putting work there to help your player build a more, solidified and robust coach-athlete relationship. And there are a lot of dynamics there, and they interplay with each other. And you may be that child player that your parent is not immersed so much in your sporting performance, and that's okay. You could have a guardian that is, but maybe it's just you. But if it is just you, it's still important for the parents out there to tune in, hopefully, and listen, to acknowledge their part in the journey. And when we say journey, we're looking at that pathway towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Now, I also understand and acknowledge there are probably a lot of players, athletes out there that just have that singular relationship when we're looking at that coach-athlete. We term it. So obviously that coach, so for the coaches out there, you are that role model and you are that adult figure. So please be mindful of that, because I think a lot of coaches neglect that at times, and the fundamental role they play in the development on a more broader spectrum of that player athlete. But also to be able to have, those pivotal conversations with the player athlete, again, around purpose and intent. And again, so for the players and athletes out there, if it's just you, I get it, okay? And so it's one to be able to have those conversations with your coach. And if you do not have, access to that parent and or guardian, with your performance, then I'd encourage you to have that interchanging and interactive relationship with one of your closest friends and or one of the players, whether they're on your team, they're at your club, you train with them, or maybe you're not at all, but they still do play a sport. But, there are so many different dynamics there, sport or no sport, because at the end of the day, it's really finding that other person where you can share your ideas with, the trials and tribulations that's saying there. But it's important to be able to brainstorm in more than one way. So to share your intent and your purpose, but so it's mutual. So you're sharing this with your friend as well as them sharing with you. And this might seem, common sense for others, but we're really focusing on the performance element here. So obviously, friendship aside, that's one, so that's external. But when we're looking at our performance specifically and optimizing our performance and how we can, bring in that purpose to that intent more, tightly and more purposefully, it's really about having those discussions. So at the end of the day, of course, you can have those internal discussions and you can have them, with your coach. Yes, but we're looking for that third wheel, so to speak. So again, in that triangular relationship, the parent and or guardian is that third. But I'm saying if that's not available to you at this point, irrespective obviously of where you are at on the pathway, there are alternative options. And because we acknowledge that one size does not fit all. So what I say to one, again, is not going to be necessarily applicable to the other. And we touch on this a lot because essentially that's what the 7 keys is about, and we really want to make sure that it is that individualized approach. So I'm very conscious here sharing this with you, that whether that that third is that parent guardian, or is one of your friends, or it is someone who's at that club you train with constantly as well, it doesn't matter. You find what works best for you and you roll with it. Because if you find what works best for you and you roll with it, you are already on that pathway towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Because a lot of roadblocks happen when you are let's say inadvertently forced or encouraged to go a certain way that it's not where you want to head. So whilst we're keeping that intent and purpose front and center and being mindful of that, that's where we get the win, so to speak. So let's wrap it back when we go, all right, let's dig a bit deeper today about your purpose and the intent. And look, one of my latest publications is the 7 Keys to Optimize Your Life, which obviously shares about the 7 keys. But in there, it actually uses tennis as that blueprint that transfers over essentially into life in and of itself. And I say that specifically for today's episode because there are so many elements to aspect in life that are applicable here, that it's not just for the tennis player. Obviously, if you are that tennis player listening, it is applicable. But I'm saying that it's applicable for the individual, and we are all individuals here. And it's really about the intent behind what you are doing and the purpose behind what you are doing. And I think each and every person can resonate with that there is a purpose to pretense behind, I guess, any given action. Obviously varying depending on the context. So look, let's dig a bit deeper, and if you want to follow along, we are on page 153, and I'm going to begin to dive in that bit deeper. The average developing athlete has a structured day, a day organized for them by their parents or guardians. Keeping in mind, this developing athlete is either pre-teen or early teen. Now, look, it's so important here to say, look, I acknowledge that you could be in this age bracket, but when we're talking about the pathway, you could be, that 17, 18, 19, or you could be in your early 20s, you could be top 50 in the world, progressing towards the top 30, the top 20. So potentially you are not in that teen bracket. So it's very important here to share that it's not necessarily that teenage bracket. What we're referring to is that structure, and being mindful of that structure and having the tools to be able to recreate that structure by yourself, not relying on other people. Now, there's a very good chance if you are top 30, top 20, you do rely on other people. But this is not to say it's negative in that respect. It's endeavoring to empower you with your decisions, to make sure, irrespective of that decision, that there is that intent and purpose there that you are encouraged to make, opposed to having another person make them for you. Okay. Around this age bracket, players are not only developing in their sport of choice, but they have their days planned almost to a T, predominantly by the requirement to learn. Attending school. Most simply, parents and or guardians ensure their children get to and from school throughout the weekday. That's a big chunk of the day taken up just by school. And again, I'm going to acknowledge here that if you are external to school. So you've already graduated, and or potentially you're in your early 20s, irrespective if you are doing studies on the side, but your days are not, surrounded by or based on, the typical school requirements there. So it's just a rule of thumb. So keep in mind, we're looking at structure. We're looking at that level of independence. We're looking at how is your day built. So for that school-aged person, so again, if you're in that developmental age bracket and you are still physically attending school, and it's not just physically, it also could be, for a lot of cases these days, online, but it's that structure, it's that requirement that you need to show up. So your days are blocked off with certain commitments. Now, how this transfers over to your performance, before we get, on too much of a tangent, it transfers going with what blocks in your day do you have available to work on your performance. Is, say, 80% of your day is, that's all, looking at your schooling and your learning, so your specific schedule in that respect. So your afternoon typically is where you may train, and or your morning could be where you train. But it's really dependent on the decision making that happens here, the scheduling that happens there, and if you have a level of control around that, and or what you do with it. Okay, so that's a big chunk of the day taken up just by school, right? So luckily for these players, or those students first, their teachers direct or instruct them on what they are learning on that given day, walk them through what they need to do, and thus the days and weeks learning purposes are pre-planned in the teacher's mind, all thanks to their prior planning. All right, so I think with that last piece, you get where I'm going. And it's about that prior planning, and it's really about, if you are in, that school system in some way, shape or form, another person is responsible for that structure. So they're responsible for that planning and the intent, so that the purpose of that learning. And you really do not have to think about it. There is absolutely null planning on your behalf. Sure, you have, assessments, etc. you may have to do. But we're really looking at here, do you have a form of structure that you are responsible for? More often than not, that's not the case. And this is applicable now for those of you who have left school and or are playing full-time, irrespective of what your ranking is, whether it's 500, 300, top 20, it doesn't matter here. We're really focusing on structure and intent, but now it's up to you. What happens when that teacher is not there to help structure? So a lot of you will be learning potentially the hard way about this structure. Some of you are, I hope there's an easy way here. But when it really comes down to that planning, the coach is going to obviously help plan with you, but that's only for a portion of the day. It's really up to you how you go about that. Now, you ask how, what is, the secret answer here? But there is no secret other than what is your intent. And that intent is incredibly powerful, because every time you step onto the tennis court, that is a question you should be asking yourself in detail. But also when you step off the tennis court, what is your intent behind that? There is also potentially the intent behind just resting and recovering. So when you step away from, that performance perspective and you head home, so to speak, your intent in this respect is really simply going to be to rest and relax, perhaps. Okay, but follow along because we really want to, knuckle down around intention and purpose and the correlation there. And again, we're looking at optimizing your performance. So how does this interplay with that? These purposes will be different for all teachers, although similar in content. Think math, science, geography, and so forth, due to the basic learning requirements of each subject. Each teacher will add their own spin to the lesson due to their personalized nature. Whether mundane, creative, or interactive, there are numerous ways to change and customize learning objectives that have a purpose by learning with intent. Now, for the coaches out there, obviously parents and players, listen up, but specifically with the coaches, this is where you come in. Coaches are the teachers. Now, I'm sure you've heard that many times before. If not, there you go. But coaches are those teachers. Coaches are responsible, obviously, for that structure, for that pre-planning, what's going ahead. You're also responsible for your different takes, so that different spin, but you're also responsible for that level of engagement that we've touched on in previous episodes as well. So you could be really mundane and your player's just really not interested. You could be really creative, so your player is constantly engaged and they do not want to leave. And again, if you really want to foster that coach-athlete relationship towards the next level, you're obviously going to make it even more interactive there. So that comes down to your own coaching pedagogy and what's incorporated there and within it. And obviously, if you're privy to the 7 keys, it's going to be incredibly powerful. And obviously, that's what we want to hear. For the players and athletes, though, again, if you are within that developmental bracket, so let's say pre-professional, so you're not on tour yet, there's going to be a lot of guidance here, or there should be. If there's not, parents, listen up. It's time to switch. Sorry to those of you coaching, but you need to amp, your coaching game up in this respect. Specifically, though, if you are on tour, if you are progressing, whether it's 800 to 500 to 200, and you could be 80 in the world, hopefully your coach has taught you a level of structure, and they continuously integrating structure in different ways with that purpose, with that intent to engage you. But also, ideally, they have the 7 keys and they're continuously being mindful that your conditioning is centered around that, because that's how we head towards a top 10 tennis ranking. If that is not the case, please head to AIMA International, read up, upskill, and then join the pathway, join the long game, so you are on your way to progress even further. But when we're specifically looking at that intent and that structure, we're looking again at the coach as that teacher and essentially your mentor in one and potentially more ways on how we can do that. But it's incredibly important to be mindful that a coach is not able to be your mentor, let alone your teacher, unless they're equipped with the tools. And we're not just talking about a baseline knowledge here. We're talking about how to follow the long game, for example. And how we do that, obviously, is upskilling and being privy to that depth of knowledge, to that breadth of work, obviously available at AIMA International. You've hopefully listened to previous episodes, and I've touched on why federations do not have access to this. And essentially, in a nutshell, it's for you. It's to make sure you, the players and the coaches and parents out there, remain front and center and you have access, that it's not locked away in a federation. So it's been done for you there. Please take advantage of that. Here we go. What is the difference when players or athletes go to training? First of all, this part of their day isn't as structured as their schooling. Why not? Because they don't have to attend. That's really one. They choose to partake in their sport of choice, just like students who wish to further their education after school and attend universities or take on apprenticeships. This further attendance is done by choice and with a purpose. This is absolutely pivotal when we're really digging deeper, because at the end of the day, and this is really for the coaches out there, that player, that athlete, they're showing up because they want to. They genuinely want to be there, okay? And for the parents, if your child genuinely wants to be there, then please encourage them, because more often than not, between that developmental period, so we can look at, let's say, 12 to 16 years of age, we know there is a substantial drop-off in sports participation. Now, I've touched on the reasons why in my body of work, so in previous texts, but in a nutshell, we're looking at, obviously, we want to optimize the performance. We want to keep that level of engagement up. We want to keep the intent and the purpose there. And we need to encourage that. And that's where the coaches and the parents come in. If you are that player athlete, you're listening, you're still in the game, you still have the love for it, you still have the intent and the purpose, high fives all round, because that's how we obviously partake in the long game. We head towards that top 10 tennis ranking, but coaches, parents, you play a role too. Obviously, the guardians out there, the best friends out there too, the support networks out there. Okay, but it's so pivotal to hopefully not take it for granted when that player athlete shows up, because they're doing it because they want to. And the coaches, please feel empowered to just hand that over. Empower your players and athletes to nudge them closer and closer towards that next peak performance, and continue along, I guess, that peak performance cycle that we've touched on, to allow them to progress. And the way you're allowed to, I guess, or you're equipped to do that, is by harnessing the 7 keys and progressively integrating them. But, and this is what today's episode is all about, it's having that sense of purpose, but also the intent. A player's intention to learn, to improve their sporting performance, is essentially made evident by their presence, by turning up unless they are given a reason not to. And this is what it's all about, because if that player, that athlete, you're rocking up to practice, and the coach, you're pivotal here to guide them. And obviously, if that parent and guardian is around, it's up to you as well to contribute towards that, to also empower that. The role of the coach is to ensure, like the teacher, that the player is there for the right reason. Although in school, the student doesn't have a choice. It is a timely reminder that some players or athletes don't have a choice, and these players need to be monitored closely. And if their reason doesn't align with a coach's learning purpose, they should not be attending. And I know that sounds really harsh, and it does, but it's for very good reason. Because unfortunately, and I guess this is the parents out there as well, some players or athletes are encouraged to play a sport, but their heart's not in it. Their interest is not there, which means the intent is not there. The purpose is other. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's so important for parents to be able to have that honest conversation with the coach, and for the coach to be mindful of that. But it's so, I guess, pivotal to ask yourself the question, for the parent and the coach, what's the other? Why are they not partaking in the other, irrespective of what that is? Because at the end of the day, no one should be forced to play a sport they don't love, that their purpose, it's just not there. So there's no harm in placing them in that other sport or that other activity that I guess just really lights them up. But let's focus on tennis here, and I guess the benefits in the best possible way that we want to head towards the top 10. We want to have the skills. We want to build the foundations. We want to establish that baseline, and we can do that following obviously that pathway and the right framework. And the biggest factor here is the intent. And when we talk about the intent, it's really about each and every time. Now, this is for the players out there. You step onto the tennis court. Why? For the coaches out there, each and every time that player or players come onto your court, you are conducting a lesson. Why? What is the pretense? What is the purpose? What are you working on specifically for each individual player? And I cannot stress that enough. Each individual player. We started the episode off on this, and again, going back to that humanized approach, in that we are all individual, and it's just the same when you are on court, which means if you are having a developmental lesson and you really want to narrow in on the ground strokes, not every athlete, not every player needs to work on the same skill. There's going to be something specific, whether it's that discrete skill intertwined obviously in that serial skill, which we've touched on in more recent episodes, that you really want to knuckle down on if that is the purpose. All right, and we really want to make sure that purpose is front and center for each individual athlete. Parents, listen up. Individual there. Make sure your child's coach is modifying their lesson to accommodate your child, not all. We want to make sure again that it's specific for each individual player. Now, for the coaches out there, it's just that fine tuning, and you're able to do this incredibly easy if you have upskilled and you are mindful of the different levels, the different dynamics interplaying there, and obviously establishing a really healthy coach-athlete relationship with each and every one of your players. And by fine-tuning that's where the rewards come. Because if you're serious about developing that player and or players and progressing them to the next level, this is an absolutely a fundamental step to take. Now, for the players out there, and I think we're going to finish on this, is that for the players, it's so important to have that intent. And what I mean by that is your coach has done the work. So one, we need to say thank you so much for the coaches for doing the work and the planning, just like the teachers out there, right? But the players, this is where you come in, and this is irrespective if you are 8, you are 18, you are 28. It's across the board, and this is specifically and especially if you're looking at developing into a professional tennis player, and if you already are one, staying there and progressing then towards the top 10. Each and every time you step onto the tennis court, what is your reason? What is your purpose? What is your intent? And every single athlete I have worked with over the years, this runs true. It's a question I have asked each and every one of them. And I really hope for the coaches out there, please do your players a favor and ask them the same thing. Please build these skills. Okay, nurture these skills. For the parents, it's the same. Parents and or guardians, when you're taking them, driving them, picking them up, have those conversations. What's that intent? And you can tell a lot about a player if they're able to share with you their intent. So now I will specifically talk to the players, athletes out there. We build our intent by saying, what is it I want to work on? You want to work on your forehand, but tell me, what specifically do you want to work on? Do you want to work on your consistency? Do you want to work on 10 balls in a row at a certain pace, at a certain depth? Do you want to work on 20, 30, 40, 50 in a row without error, having them land on a certain spot on the court? So be specific here, and what do you want to work on? So what's that intent? What's your intention behind that? And then dig deeper for that purpose. And especially if you're a top 20, I really hope the intent there is you want to work on the V by Dr. B. You want to work on those proponents, and you want to be able to nudge closer towards the top 10. So you need to ascertain what level of play you're at, and I guess your level of consistency there if you're serious about heading towards the top 10. Now, if you're unsure of that, read the series, what is your game missing? So it's what is your game missing, what is your game missing now, and what is your game missing to win? So it's a 3-set series that focuses on your technical properties, so the parameters there, specifically on WTA and ATP Tour players, which means there's a very good chance if you're on tour and you've been ranked inside the top 100 and you've reached a round of 16 or higher in the last 5 years, there's a very good chance you're in one of those books, and I've broken down your performance specifically. If you want to read about how those players have specifically been broken down, that's your window, that's your preview. And I can share with you through that why they're not inside the top 10. And it's so exciting because we look at those correlations there, we look at those performance parameters there and why. But it's a very good starting point as well for the developmental athletes there, for the academy coaches out there to have a really good discussion around the contrasting relationships there, whether it's from a performance perspective or the technical parameters. So we're looking at the results but also their performance. So they're actually two different things. But we can look at that again when we're focusing on our intent and our purpose. So what's our end goal? We can say our end goal is a top 10 tennis ranking, but how are we going to get there? Oh, we're going to get there because of the pathway, the long game. Yeah, but what are you going to do every time you're on court? And it's just as applicable, trust me, if you're a top 10 tennis player, there is the intent there. There is that, obviously, that purpose there. So top 50, you really need to dig deep to be specific about that. Top 100, same applies. Top 300, same applies. It's not just, I want to get better. I can't tell you how many athletes I have overseen that say, I just want to get better. It's like, but why? What do you want to do to be able to get better? And you can't say necessarily, I want to win more matches, because sure, but that's very broad. Be specific about your intent and what you want to work on. So it's not necessarily an outcome metric we're talking about. We're looking about that performance. What's that incentive there that you want to amplify, take to the next level, to progress? And if you're that coach, hopefully you're upskilling alongside your athlete there to allow them to amplify that performance and take it to the next level. And it's just as applicable for that 15-year-old edging towards, the tour to, that 21-year-old on tour. Maybe you're ranked 80 in the world and you're aspiring to head towards, top 50, top 40, so on and so forth. But look, at the end of the day, when we're looking at our purpose, please just ask yourself, take a few quiet moments. It doesn't matter how long, just take the time and ask yourself about that purpose, and then knuckle down on your intent. So every single time you step onto the tennis court, ask yourself what your intent is, and I can guarantee you that is a big starting block when we're looking at and heading towards that top 10 tennis ranking. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really hope you enjoyed it. We got a little bit serious towards the end, but it's all for good reason. And look, to grab a copy of The Secrets to Optimal Performance Success, head on over to AM8 International. That is am8international.com. For any comments or questions, please head to AM8 as well, or Topic Thread. That's the only social network that I am on. Or to get in contact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis directly, you can find us on Threads, Twitter, Medium, Instagram, TikTok, and if it's there's a very good chance that we're on it. So please come and say hi. I guess the good news or exciting news about that is if you are following us on one of those channels, you would be aware of the scholarships that we are offering. So that's just something a little bit interesting that could pique some of your interest. I will leave all of the links in the episode notes. And look, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, follow, like. That would be absolutely phenomenal. And for those of you who have, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. For those of you who have been listening for some time now, thank you. I'm so grateful. And for those of you who have just tuned in, I'm so thankful. And I really hope you keep coming back. And feedback is always welcome. If you are on Spotify, we do have those polls there and those questions. So please feel welcome to fill them out, and I will personally review all of them. So I really hope in the best possible way you bombard me with them. So okay, on that note, look, I'm so grateful for you tuning in. If you want to learn more, head on over to the episode notes, read up on our weekly blogs, or head on over to our social channels for more so you don't miss out. So on that, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.